Therapists of Reddit, what's the worst mental health advice you've seen a movie or TV therapist give? Therapist here. For me it is when movies portray therapy as something that happens quickly, like 5 to 6 sessions and you're cured or better. Also, how some therapists are really quick to send a client to the hospital, and all of the ethic issues, especially when you see therapists discuss their clients with friends, or when they have sex with a client. I'm a trauma therapist. They like to use therapy sessions as a form of exposition in the aftermath of trauma. So inevitably, the therapist is saying, if you want to heal, you have to tell the story in as much detail as possible. Well, retelling the story like that is re-traumatizing. So either people avoid therapy after trauma because they don't want to do that, or they come in and insist that they just need to tell the story in excruciating detail and then leave flooded and triggered saying therapy doesn't work. It isn't the telling of the story that heals, it's how we hold and treat the story that matters. Therapist here. It isn't advice, but when they portray a psychiatrist doing therapy, that's not what the majority of people will get from their psychiatrist, and it causes messed up expectations. Advice-wise, it's bad when they force someone to own up to something or confront something. The client has to be ready for that and choose it for themselves after other hard work has been done to make sure they are ready. Also, any portrayal where they are meeting or interacting outside of a session. Also, the whole my client said they are going to harm someone, I'm going to intercept them myself. Not a movie, real life. My friend shared their suicidal thoughts and the motherfucker started going off about reincarnation. Some therapist they turned out to be. So many people who aren't therapists replying. Anyways, as a therapist, what annoys me about media portrayals of therapy is that we just sit and listen. That's not therapy. And constantly agreeing with your client is also not therapy. Also, that we give advice. The only advice I give is suggestions for coping skills or DBT skills, how to use cognitive restructuring, etc. I don't actually give advice because that's not my place. Clinical psych here. What annoys me is the portrayal of us as a bit unhinged ourselves, not impossible, but not to that degree, and the portrayal of the work as airy-fairy talking about emotions, or providing outdated or esoteric interpretation, when in fact it's a scientifically rigorous process. We use psychometric measures and clinical interviews to assess and diagnose, and an evidence-based approach to formulate a treatment plan with specific techniques to address physical, psychological, social, cognitive, and affective contributors to the problem. Not a therapist, but my mommy's. She says that most therapists portrayed in TV violate tons of rules and it annoys her to no end. And she's never seen a good therapist on TV ever, apparently. The movie 50 Over 50 where she sleeps with her client. That's a big no crime time. Also, it's hard to portray in movies just how long the process therapy can take for people, and there are a lot of ethical things that occur that advance the plot of a movie but shouldn't happen in the real world. Not advice per se, but I hate when the media portrays people with chronic mental illness, i.e. psychosis, bipolar disorder, as violent. A small percentage can be. I can't stand Drive, Phil. His approach is a type of bullying, yelling at parents and clients because their behavior isn't acceptable and in front of hundreds of people. Yikes. Dr. Phil is fucking cancer. Remember that episode where he brought the bum fights guy in and then acted like he couldn't stand him when the guy dressed up as him? Not a therapist. I've been chronically suicidal for years. One night at university, I was having a terrible attack. It sounds too frivolous to call it an episode, so I called the university police, who then by standard practice connect me to whichever university psychologist was on call. I'm not joking. This woman said, "Yeah, I know who you are. Your name has come up in counseling center meetings before, and you really need to get over yourself. I have a daughter with a disability who has it way worse than you. So really, you have no reason to be so depressed." How this woman was a licensed, employed psychologist is beyond me, but I quit relying on other people when I become suicidal. I'd rather suffer alone and take the chance I'll die than ever face that shit again. I hope you reported them. Read in a agony aunt newspaper column. Letter was from a teenage girl writing about her mother, and her description was basically a textbook case of a mentally and physically abusive person. Stuff like constantly feeling like you're walking on eggshells, shouting and yelling at the slightest misstep, constant belittling remarks, etc. The advice was for her and the rest of the family to be more considerate of the mother because she obviously works very hard, and maybe the daughter should look at her own actions to see if she's causing such behavior. I'm an addictions therapist and there is so much BS in the intervention. Shows that I stopped watching because it made me so angry. Also shows like 13 Reasons Why can go straight to hell. Therapist here. I remember there was this one episode of some teeny bopper show where a character would black out a lot and wake up random places. The therapist determined he was repressing trauma, but released him from treatment until he was ready to talk about it. Huge safety no-no. While I agree a client needs to process trauma on their own terms, if they are in frequent dissociative states and at that higher safety risk, they need to be continuing treatment throughout. Different note, I'm also trained in EMDR and appreciated seeing its portrayal in Grey's Anatomy. I also loved that the therapist was no nonsense and willing to call out BS. It's important to be real with our clients. Is anyone in the comments section actually a therapist? Not a therapist, but no. I know this isn't about a therapist, but I really hate when media portrays someone with a mental illness as someone who wears dark clothing, piercings, listens to heavy metal, wears dark makeup, and has a hairstyle that isn't normal by society's standards. We look like your mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, even your neighbor. Not all of us wear/do those things. We literally are just everyday people who happen to have a mental illness. Not specifically a movie, but that shirt that says something along the lines of how if you can't handle me at my worst you don't deserve me at my best. I've seen multiple people completely alienate and cause profound problems due to not properly managing mental illness. They don't attempt to adjust their lifestyle, meds, therapy, support groups, diet, exercise, and expect the world to somehow write them a whole pass for the damage they have done. Mental illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. If your actions negatively affect other people when you aren't at your best and you aren't doing anything to help yourself, you are being selfish in my opinion. I'm a very patient person with my own issues that I address, but I can't understand how others don't realize the impact they can have on their own friends and family by not even trying to get healthy. I'm bipolar, and I have a rule. I'm responsible for how I act, no matter how I feel. I don't get to say/do terrible things to the people I love, and then say sorry, I was having a bad day. That doesn't erase the thoughts that I planted in my 12-year-old's head, or repair the damage I may have done to my marriage. Of course, I screw up sometimes, but thinking about how I'm affecting other people helps me maintain. I'm not a therapist, but it annoys me how often people say some people have mental health. No, we all have mental health, just at different levels. Some people have good mental health. The This Is Us episode where the therapist decides to trigger our anxiety attack as an evaluation tool. Whenever you're feeling down, just beat the everling shit out of your dick. Not necessarily a therapist's advice, but lots of people will tell someone with mental health issues that they just need to pray more or give it up to God. I know it's an attempt to be helpful, but can be so counteractive for someone with mental health struggles, like it's their fault for not having enough faith. My father is like this. When I was diagnosed with OCD, his response was, well, I have OCD too. I just think about what God wants me to do, and I do it. That's not how this works. Then when he found out I also have bipolar disorder and was getting help for it, he keeps trying to convince me that I don't need doctors or all the medications. He honestly thinks that I'm just medicating sin and character flaws, and if I pray to God for forgiveness, he'll heal me. Not a therapist, but I have borderline personality disorder, and I hate seeing how we are portrayed in films and TV shows. We are either boiling rabbits, or we become serial killers. Criminal Minds did that one. Don't even get me started on girl. Interrupted. In real life, I had a therapist tell me to stop worrying about the borderline and do daily affirmations to battle my depression. Fired her and found a therapist who sent me for DBT. The TV show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend does a really excellent portrayal of BPD. I had a family member go to rehab for substance abuse. They were doing well, better than they had in a decade. In fact, the counselor told them that they were in the honeymoon or pink cloud of sobriety and that things would get worse. Things got worse. The counselor's words were what it took to make them start to question everything they were using shortly afterwards. Words have consequences. When a person first enters sobriety, they are fragile. It doesn't take much to tip them over. I believe that counselor was somewhat responsible for the failure. The subject of the pink cloud wasn't handled very well at all. Not excusing my family member, but the subject could have been handled better than it was. Anything from Freud or Jung or any other old twat that should only be relevant for a history perspective. If you want really bad mental health advice, you don't need mass media. You just need Reddit. Not a therapist, but I have clinical depression and have been to the hospital for it. When people say that everything will be okay or just be positive, shit like that doesn't help. And anyone who has dipped into a depressive state will tell you that. In terms of TV therapists, in movies and TV it makes it look like it's just a few sessions of therapy and everything is okay. Also not the case. Some people will spend their whole lives going to therapy. I've been in therapy since I was in the 3rd grade, for example.